కాసిందే కోలు పున్నాము వెన్నెల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు
నీరు నిమ్మల కింద గన్నెర్ల కింద వంగి పూలే రంగ కొంగందుతూనే వంగి పూలే రంగ
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very last session of HLF 2021. And if you hear a sigh of relief in my voice, that's entirely intentional. We started this festival, this edition of the festival with Gulzar Saab. And as I said at the inaugural, we are ending it with a session on Rumi by Farrukh Dhondy. And this is probably a befitting finale to the festival. Farrukh Saab, thank you very much for joining us. And we are delighted to have you at the festival. And we are going to talk about your latest book, Rumi, which is you have come out with a new collection. But before that, let me quickly introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Farrukh Dhondy, author of a number of books. I've been following him since his Pune days. His Pune company days, and he's of course an author of several books: East End at Your Feet, Pune Company, Bombay Duck, and so on and so forth. He has also written for both film and television, including a film that we are all familiar with, Mangal Pandey. And today, this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to host Farrukh Dhondy, even if it is virtually. We cannot offer the Hyderabadi biryani to him, but yet we are delighted to have him with us this evening to talk about his latest book, Rumi, A New Collection, which has come out in 2020. A beautiful book and beautifully produced, and Farrukh Saab is going to talk about it with Mohini. Mohini Gupta is a D.Lit student at Oxford, and she's a poet. She's a translator. She translates, between Hindi and English, and she also ran a very successful program, Mother Tongue Twisters, which was very, very successful, particularly during the lockdown days. So, welcome to both of you, Mohini and Farrukh Saab. Thank you very much, and I will disappear now. And I'll come back after about 35 minutes. And meanwhile, you guys have a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vijay, for the warm introductions, and thank you for this invitation. And thank you to the Hyderabad Literary Festival for giving me this very rare opportunity to speak to Mr. Farrukh Dhondy, who's here with us. So I'm really privileged to be sharing this virtual stage with him. As Vijay just told us, he is an iconic writer, playwright, screenwriter, activist. It's also very special to be here with him today because it happens to be his birthday. I was really glad to know this.
Happy birthday.
Very, very happy birthday to you, Mr. Dhondy. This is, extra little bonus information that we just received. So this is really special.
It's my privilege to be here. Thank you very much. And that was a very kind and over-the-top introduction, but so one lives and learns. Thank you.
No, thank you. And we've followed your work for so many years now through your books, through your screenplays. Also, you've played an important role in shaping a lot of British television viewing habits through all the work that you've done at Channel 4 over the years as well. And, everything is sort of a practice of translation in some sense, and I'm going to come back to that in some of the questions that we will, be engaging in. But today we're here to speak about your new book, Rumi, a New Collection, published by HarperCollins, which is your second collection of Rumi's translations. He is, of course, one of the most loved poets in the world, Jalaluddin Rumi, and he needs no introduction, especially to this audience who's here to listen about him today. And it really is a wonder, and it remains a wonder how this 13th century poet continues to resonate with millions of people all over the world today, hasn't lost his charm. So I'm really looking forward to your nuanced views on him, because in the way that he has sort of become so popular, there's also a lot of misinterpretations and misunderstandings that sort of happen with this, and in the way that he's become a part of popular culture almost. So I'd love to get your views on that later on as well. But I think first I just wanted to ask you, when you came across his work for the first time, what, given your the multiple lives that you lead, what is it that brought you to Rumi for the first time? How did you end up doing the first translation?
Okay, being a Parsi and growing up in a Parsi family or several families, moms, dads, you get to know about Rumi because grandfathers and others, uncles and so on, are well-versed sometimes in Persian and so forth. So you get to hear about Rumi all the time, and it's kind of passed me by until one day I was traveling to Australia. And on a plane, a friend of mine, Soli Irani, gave me a book of Rumi anthologies. And I thought, for God's sake, let me get down to reading for once what I've heard about all my life. So on the plane, I read these American translations of Rumi. And I thought, this is a load of garbage, because I couldn't follow the metaphors. I didn't understand the prose. It was written in chopped up lines. And I said, this is not poetry. What kind of tosh is this? Anyway, I got back there, and in Bombay, when I got back from Australia, I asked my mamu, my mom's brother, younger brother, is this Rumi or rubbish? And he said, how dare you? And started reciting stuff in Persian, right? And I said, hang on, what does that mean? He said, what do you mean? What does it mean? And he started reciting again. And I began counting on my fingers. I said, hang on, that's iambic pentameter. The 13th century poet, 4 centuries before, or 3 centuries before Shakespeare, was writing in iambic pentameter. Ta-tum, 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 that sort of stuff. And I said, what does it mean? And he began translating it, slightly Urdu, slightly English, slightly Gujarati. And I picked up a pad and started scribbling. I said, say some more. He said some more. I translated some more. And that night I stayed awake and worked at turning what he had said in prose into verse, that is iambic pentameter, and the rhyming couplets that Rumi uses throughout the Masnavi. So I tried that form and thought, yeah, this works. Next day, of course, as soon as I could, I got him to recite some more, when he was off work, and he did. And that started me off on the Rumi translations. Came back to London, found a friend who could actually speak a lot of Persian called Firdaus Ali. He translated a lot of stuff for me in very, very faltering English prose, and I turned that prose into the verse. And that was, in fact, the pattern of the first and indeed the second book.
That's really fascinating. I hadn't realized this about the iambic pentameter, that's what he was using in the 13th century.
Yeah. Iambic pentameter and strict rhyme.
Yeah.
Very strict rhyme. And beautifully in Persian, because Rumi can be mischievous as well as philosophical at the same time, right? So he can take a very silly sounding metaphor, but make the most profound parable out of it.
My next question to you was going to be, and you sort of touched upon it now, but I was curious. I was really fascinated by the way you've kept the meter and rhyme in your translations. And I'm a big fan of prioritizing that in a translation, because I feel like that's a very important aspect of the poem that one is working with in the original. So you've kept that in your translations. And I was just wondering how, along with that, what are the other things that you feel are distinct about your translation, compared to the years and years of translation that we've seen by scholars like William Jones to Colin Barks, and there are so many out there. So what sort of inspired you to create this new translation? If there are reasons apart from the sort of rhyme that you wanted to recreate in the translation.
Well, if you look at William Jones, right, way back, and then the two most important translators are Nicholson and Professor A.J. Arbery, right, of Cambridge, you will see that they do it in mostly. They write prose translations also, but Arbery then turns it into verse as much as well as he can, because that is really Victorian and Georgian traditions of verse. They have not come across, or they might have come across, but they're not attempting T.S. Eliot or Ezra Pound, right? And they needn't, because they think that this religious verse, basically, verse of love, verse of philosophy, verse of human endeavor, it should be translated in the kind of verse that Rumi had, because poetry, as far as Rumi is concerned, is meaning and music, right? And if you take away the music and try and render the meaning, it can't be done. The music has to go hand in hand with the meaning, because the music is part of the meaning. It's part of the imparting of that philosophy. He's being called the Quran in verse. Right? Now, I don't know about the Quran, but certainly that long tradition of parables, which comes from Jesus Christ and the Testament, the stories which then have a moral, and of course, the Quranic essay, the Quranic morality comes all the way through. What has happened recently is that America has become, let's say, in very, very generalized terms, a bit pissed off with its materialism. It doesn't like its own material life. And therefore, you find in America huge swathes of people turning to yoga, spirituality, following any damn charlatan, I can name one of them, is, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, talk a lot of easy philosophy, don't obey your parents because they are conventionally stuck to something else, have free sex, all that sort of stuff. That kind of spirituality, into quotes, has caught on in America. And in that vein, a lot of people have begun to translate Rumi to try and give the people the feeling that they are being very spiritual and that they are getting away from the material chains of their lives in order to be spiritual. It's not a conscious confidence trick, but it amounts to a cultural confidence trick of massive proportions. Because, and when they say love, when Rumi says love, for instance, right? When Rumi means love, he means love for the beloved, for God, for Allah. And that is the Sufi tradition. When you say she even, you mean God. It has been followed by Sufis from Kabir and Mira and whatnot. You say she for the ultimate, and that's his interpretation of love. What the Americans have done is they treat love as though it's about the girl next door or the person you saw on the bus, and you want to pass them a card saying, will you go out with me? Will you date me? It's not a dating app, it is an actual, it's a hymn to the Almighty. And that mistake has been has been misunderstood by the large public that he has gathered through Madonna and Coleman Barks and other such translators. Even, I regret to say, Deepak Chopra, who, writes without rhyme, without reason, with mixed metaphors, I don't know. It's well, try it. You'll see what I mean.
Now, it's really interesting how it's come to be appropriated in the public imagination in this way. But coming back to what you were saying about musicality and meaning, I found it very interesting what you said in your note in this collection, where you said, if music be the food of love, to deprive Rumi's verses of their musicality in his celebration and rendition of eternal love is to leave the reader hungry. And I thought that was very apt, just, how much you prioritized the musicality of the poems almost over the meaning, but sometimes sort of kept a balance between the two. But I was also, coming back to the process of translation that you were engaged in this collection. You do also say in the note that a good translation should endeavor to carry across the creation of one culture to the sensibilities of another. It is in a way something that you've been doing through television as well. You have been sort of carrying across, different cultures and adapting them to the sensibilities of another. But I was just wondering, because this is a poetry translation, it comes with a lot of additional challenges. So what were those additional challenges that you had to deal with? And maybe you could read us some poems as well to give us a sense of how they sound in the English version as well.
Okay, Mohini, a massive number of questions there in that last paragraph. What it is you are not simply translating from one language to another. You're translating from one culture to another. Now, as we become more and more global, as people pick up stuff from each other, you only have to look at the choreography of Bollywood films to realize that they have nothing to do with Bharatnatyam. They have nothing to do with Kathakali, right? They are basically, they don't even have anything to do with the Kathak of the Anarkali and the dancers. What they have to do with is an imitation of American hip hop, rap, this, that, and the other. So we become more global and we amalgamate cultures in all sorts of ways. But with poetry, it becomes a bit difficult, especially if you're picking up a 13th century poet in Persian with all his musicality and mischief. And then stories in which he doesn't, he doesn't pull his punches to be politically correct. Very many of the narrative poems have a lot of sex in them. And the sex is pretty explicit in the Persian words, in the demotic words that he uses. My publishers have been shy of a couple of things and said, no, Farrukh, you can't publish this, because it mentions this and that word, which we don't particularly want. So those poems have been excluded. I won't bore the public with them or inflict them on a family audience. But he is mischievous in that way too. But his philosophy, of course, cannot be doubted. There is something about the opening of the heart, the opening of the spirit to the largeness of the universe, which, of course, in the Sufi in the Sufi theology is God. I can read you some. Let me read you some small philosophical pieces to start with. Okay?
That would be great. That would be great, yes.
Right. The worm whose appetite for vine leaves will suddenly sprout wings as he conceives that he is not a crawler anymore. He's transformed. The sky is an open door. He's the vine and all the vineyard too. God's embrace is the same for me and you. Thus, realization is what it takes to become yourself when your soul awakes. Okay?
Thank you. I love listening to the rhyme. It's really it's
Something
really...
quite different. Love without a beloved is most pure, and toil without a purpose will endure. With clever tricks, you did the world enthrall. Giving up tricks was the cleverest of them all. Yeah?
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. O mortal, you can look back to the past, the present being nothing but the last separation of what your mind was aware. The future is a void. There's nothing there. Okay. Shall I read you a narrative poem, a story poem?
Please go ahead. That would be great.
Okay. This one is called A Little More Light, Please. Sorry if that, yeah. It's called The Gnats and Suleiman. A swarm of gnats appeared at Suleiman's court. The king of justice asked them what they sought. You are, O king, defender of the weak. There's none weaker than us. That's why we seek justice through you. The king then asked these gnats, what is your complaint? Because that's the rule of justice, which allows defense from those who are accused of some offense. The gnats agreed and named their oppressor as the world's winds, which whirl and sweep and whir through their habitat, stirring up the grass. The king said, very well, before I pass any judgments, I must hear the wind's case. So courtiers, bring the east wind to this place. The east wind had no choice but to obey, and arriving there, blew the gnats away. Such is the fate of seekers who complain when God arrives to alleviate their pain. They aren't taken by force and swept aside, but like the gnats and wind, they are unified. Okay.
Excellent. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed reading this one as well. So I'm glad that you've read this out.
Any more?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more. Why don't we do one more and then go back to the conversation?
Okay. Here's the very famous poem of Rumi's. It's called The Song of the Reed. Everybody has translated it, right? Oh, let the grieving of the reed be heard. It sings of the parting it has suffered. I was from the bed of reeds rudely rent. O humans, resonate in my lament. To the breast that has suffered separation, this cry of parting is a sad libation. The one who finds himself so far from home thinks only of the day he will come home. I wandered in gatherings of men who were sorrowful, though some were happy too. And though from among those I made the best of friends, I kept my secret in my breast. My secret is the essence of this grief, to which no sight or sound can bring relief. Our bodies give our souls a sanctuary, and yet the soul remains a mystery. The flute's music is not man's breath, but fire. This fire is love, the essence of desire. The turbulence of love is in the wine. Those not on fire will never know love divine. The reed is the voice of all who are lovelorn. The melodies ensure all veils are torn. All opposites are one. Disease and cure is the reed's longing for pure love impure. The reed sings the song that broke Majnu's heart, the song of belonging and being torn apart. The sense is senseless to all that has occurred. The sensitive ear is receptive to the word. Through worldly attachments, days turn into nights, rendering us as longings all our appetites. Though time makes the ages, don't fear growing old. Let all that is holy before your eyes unfold. The fish that's born to water needn't fear a flood. For the hungry human, weakness thins the blood. Raw meat can't predict the taste of cooked sauce. So farewell. That's the end of this discourse. You see, in the seriousness, he brings on this kind of mischief. Raw meat can't tell you what sauce is going to taste like. It's the end of this discourse. Bye, chaps. So that's.
No, that was absolutely incredible.
That's a sample.
Thank you so much for reading these. And I also want to say a quick thank you to everyone who is listening to us right now. There are some great comments and questions coming in from the live audience, which we will get to towards the end of the session. But thank you so much for watching, those of you who are here. Farrukh, thank you again. And, I'm sorry to keep coming back to this question of rhyme and meter, but I'm just so fascinated by how you do it because, as a translator myself, I'm really interested in knowing from you, translating into rhyme has this danger of sort of sounding very contrived or very forced if you sort of convert it into rhyme. And it can become, it can sometimes not sound natural when you're translating into rhyme. I've tried this so many times with some Hindi poets when I'm translating into English or translating from English to Hindi, and I have to work really hard to make sure that it sounds sort of natural. But yours does, and I'm really curious to know: was it something you thought about? Was it something you faced as a challenge while working on it?
Well, the main thing about it is it has to sound conversational. It has to sound something you can read out. Obviously, that's not possible with philosophical poems and so on. It can't be completely possible, but as much of it as you can make idiomatic, as without going into stupid modern words. If you can make something sound as though somebody is speaking the lines, then it works. I mean, Shakespeare wrote in iambic pentameter. Somebody said, that's not how people speak. But W.H. Auden said, if people spoke in iambic pentameter, that is how they would speak. So when one translates Rumi, you say, if people spoke in rhyme, that is how they would speak. The only thing that I'm wary of when doing the rhyme is of becoming childish, right? I don't want to say, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. I don't want to become that, even though that's a great rhyme. The lamb was sure to go, that's good. But that was my fear when I was, if you say, as you have some awkwardnesses, if a rhyme sounds terribly childish, I try and think of something more profound.
Exactly. Yeah, that remains my concern. But really, it sort of navigates all of those things and doesn't fall into those traps. So that's brilliant. I also wanted to come back to something that you were talking about this sort of misinterpretation of Rumi's poems. When we convert them into motivational quotes or memes or things that seem very accessible to the audiences today. And I wanted to know from you, because of your nuanced understanding of his work and of his life, given the sort of modern interpretations of love and spirituality today, what do you think is the one thing we can do to change the way that we see Rumi today or to understand him today? What is the greatest disservice we've done, and how can we reverse that? Are there ways that we can do that today? Are there ways we can, come back from it?
Mohini, absolutely not. There are no ways that, writers, scribblers can do anything about changing the way something is perceived in the past. And actually, I don't mind the kind of the translations, which I won't read myself, of Rumi as a substitute for spirituality. Anything that can pull America, for instance, or people who feel that they are materialistic. I'm not saying that all America does, but anything that can get us away from the mindsets that have infested the capitalist world is welcome. And so all the pseudo-spiritual translations and Madonna's songs about Rumi, they're quite welcome. I wish them extremely well, as I wish President Biden in his quest to unite America. It won't happen, but there we go.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you. Before we wrap up and move on to audience questions, which we will in a few minutes, I was also wondering, what you're currently working on. What is it that we can look forward to from you? Are there new books? Are there new translations? Just a little bit about your life beyond this collection as well.
Okay, the year of silence, right? Of meeting people outside, this COVID plague has given me a lot of time to sit at the computer, to think, walking about in the house even, or on the streets outside, or in gardens. And I've done a lot of work. Written a children's book called Truth and Lies. Written a novel called Tibetan Gospel, which I'm getting my agent to now try and sell. It's a kind of mixture between Dan Brown and Dostoevsky. So I don't suppose I don't know who'll publish it, but let's see. And then a couple of stage plays, one about Rumi and Shams, right? Now, this is worth talking about because it has three people or three entities on stage. Rumi himself is an actor and speaks the lines of my verse and some connecting verses which are not in the books, right? Shams, on the other hand, his guru and lover, is not represented by an actor, but by an orchestra on stage. And the orchestra on stage musical has been taken on by a great percussionist in London called Talveen Singh. And if Talveen plays the answers that Shams gives in music, subsidized by a female background voice, who might say that this is what Shams is talking about in his music if you don't quite understand it, right? So if Rumi asks a question, and it's a story. It's the story of how Shams came into Rumi's life. And so it's experimental, but then so many modern plays are. I mean, think of Samuel Beckett or Harold Pinter, and one moves on from there. So one instrumental and one actor and a chorus, a female chorus in the back with poetry might work. Let's see. I'm sending it out to directors and theaters now.
This sounds very, very exciting. We're going to look out for this and wait for this to be on stage.
Please do.
Extremely
and then Amazon has commissioned an autobiography. Now, I told them I'm too young for an autobiography, but they said, no, you're too old for an autobiography, but do it anyway. So I've attempted it. And at first I called it Defining Moments, but they don't like Defining Moments. They don't like the title. Then I called it Sins of Confession. And then I thought, no, can't be that because it sounds too Catholic, It sounds as though I'm some kind of Christian boring everybody. And then I called it Parsi Custard, but they don't like that. So I'm now thinking of a title, Watch This Space.
Wow, that is a lot to look forward to. And you clearly used
Year of
it
work.
very well. So congratulations on that. It's been a productive year for you. So that's
You have to keep working or you go mad.
no,
Yeah.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be moving on to audience questions.
Please.
Should we? We have another 5 minutes. If you have other questions, you can go ahead. We have about 5 minutes more.
Okay, great. I thought we're already at the time for audience questions and answers.
No, you can take 5 more.
We can talk more about. I mean, there's so much to talk about when it comes to this collection and translation. I wanted to come back to the challenges question. I wanted to ask you what you feel. The cliche of getting lost in translation. Do you feel like there are things that you found extremely difficult to bring to the other side in this translation? What were the things that you feel would inevitably get lost in translation, specifically when it comes to this collection?
Okay, the one thing that is getting lost is the values that that Persian puns have, right? When he says, one word, it means two different things in Persian, right? And that has been explained to me, even though I don't speak Persian at all. Yeah, it has been explained to me that, look, this word means that, and he has rhymed it. So that mischief of punning a word and getting it across in a cultural way to have two meanings, that has to go, because it doesn't work in English. It can't be translated. That is genuinely destined to be lost in translation, right? The other thing is, sometimes he has a very, shall we say, non-woke, non-politically correct attitude to several things. Yeah, and it's difficult to translate that into English without sounding as though you are, homophobe or vulgarian or sexist or racist. I don't think, though even once or twice he has indulged in a bit of attack on some other nationality, shall we say. So those things are excluded. They're not lost in translation. They can be translated, but publishers, for instance, don't want to publish the vulgarity that he sometimes. There was a story about a caliph and his general and a lady, let's call her that. And good story, but my publishers wouldn't have it because it was all to do with sex. So there we are. That also has to be excluded. It goes away. Otherwise, I think, if one can get into the translation mode and accept that one culture can't come 100% across in another, then we've reached the point at which, these translations can work. Arbery and I'll tell you a short story. When I first went up to Cambridge, to Pembroke College, I'd just come straight out of Pune and gone for the first time abroad. And in the first court, Cambridge colleges are divided into courts, right? In the first court, they have names on every doorway. And one of them said, Professor A.J. Arbery. I didn't know who he was at the time. Yeah. But I used to see this old man with a walking stick coming out. He didn't do any lectures. He was just living in the college at the time, passing through the courtyard and going. And I asked somebody, who's that? They said, oh, that's Prof. Arbery. He's been around a long time. Little did I know that 40 years later, I'd be translating and using his translations to help me along in mine.
I read this anecdote in your note, and I found it very fascinating how these things just come together. That was really
his movie, yeah. Professor Arbery. I remember him so clearly. small man walking along with his walking stick in the first quad.
How amazing. No, and even the question you raised about these ideological clashes that you can sometimes have with the author is an interesting one, because then what do? Do you censor it according to the sensibilities of today? Do you so that's also a very interesting question in the, when you talk about translation, about what you really do when it starts clashing with your values today. And it is something that is 700-800 years old, and there are definitely going to be, ways in which we think about things so differently now. So that's definitely a big challenge.
That is so. That's so. You do get such ideological clashes, but that's happening all over the world, not only in translation and different things. The other day I read that the word nitty-gritty, which means getting down to the basics of it, is being objected to because they said it originated in slave ships or something. And so tracing the etymology of it to slave ships means a phrase has to be expunged from the English language or something. I mean, that's an argument. I'm not taking any sides. I'm just saying this is what's happening all over the world. We may not sympathize with it, but there you are, it's happening.
I think Vijay is back to do some questions and answers. So
Before I ask the audience questions, I had a very quick question. Something like a follow-up of what Mohini was asking about. Do we read our times back into an older text? And because particularly when we are translating, what kind of language do we choose? I mean, what register do we use? Do we use the modern, language that we are speaking? Because you spoke about conversation, right? It should sound like conversational. So do we use today's language, or do we try to get a kind of a period flavor to the translations?
Well, I know that you can't get the period flavor of the Persian of the 13th century. You can't. What you can do is get the respectful flavor of your own times. So if you look at Nicholson's translations or Arbery's translations or William Jones's translations, you will find that they use the idiom of of the 18th century or of Victorian and Tennysonian tenets of rhyme and so forth. And that sort of language makes it sound the respectability. It strives for the respectability of Rumi's religious language. The American translations today use all manner of Americanisms. I try to avoid using anything like awesome or humongous or calling anybody a dude, right? Or bro, I need to get away from that to keep some respect for Rumi. So, even though his poetry is awesome, I avoid trying to use those sorts of words, even in my normal speech. And I never say like in between sentences.
Yeah.
I mean, being a Parsi, I could punctuate it with MC and BC and so forth, but I don't.
There are a couple of questions. Let me just ask them. One is Anju Makhija is asking, you mentioned the Rumi play. Did you use the original language by any chance? I mean,
no, it's in English. It's completely in English, and it uses quite a lot of my books, translations. Because some of the translations are direct addresses, even though it tells a story between Rumi and Shams. But thank you for that suggestion. One may throw it into, one may throw a bit of Persian verse into the songs. I don't suppose I can attribute it to you, but that's a suggestion I will certainly take on board. Thank you.
Yeah. And what do you think makes Rumi so easily appropriable?
because, one, he tells stories. And the stories that make up the morality, the parables, are very easily accessible, and they have twists and turns, like the one I read out. The gnats complain to Suleiman, saying that this wind is attacking us, and he says, "Okay, call the wind, ask the wind what it's doing." And the wind comes and blows the gnats away, and then he says, "Not that one is the enemy of the other; they have merged into one." And you get the meaning. You get the meaning that, if I look at my opposite, my opposite merges with me, and we become one in the universe with God. So it's that kind of accessibility that makes Rumi popular today, and the stories, and then the sentiments. The sentiments are not something that's heavy theology. It's not Thomas Aquinas or Duns Scotus. It's very much. It's very much, how does one apply it to a spiritual quest in life, a Sufi spiritual quest in life? Yeah, and if that can come across even in the American translations and convert, the 260 million people of America or whatever to it, especially the 74 million who voted for Trump, then I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. But I was also, there was a question somewhere here. Does it also, no, I think it was some review that I was reading, not about your book, but how in a way, Islam is taken out of Rumi so that, you can appropriate Rumi without really making an effort to understand the context from which he emerges.
Well, it's the way that is said is that obviously fundamentalist Islam has been not embraced by Rumi. Rumi's father, and then the people whom he followed, the teachers whom he followed, were all Sufis, and that was the dispute, the Sufiness against the juridical Islam took his father away from bulk. From parts of the Persian Empire where Muslim Persian Empire, which incorporated Afghanistan and so forth, it made him search for different places to be. And they were, even at the time, sultans and people, kings of different kingdoms, including those of which is now Ankara and so forth, of Rome, territories of Rome, who were Sufis, who did not believe that juridical Islam was the only way to interpret the Quran. And of course, Sufi interpretations are of certain surahs of the Quran, and with more emphasis on those than on the others. And but you can't say that you can't say that the Islam is missing from Rumi's verses, because the interpretation is the Sufi interpretation of the Quran. Yeah. Obviously, there are Wahhabis today who will say that Sufi Islam is not Islam at all. It's some kind of nonsense. They do say that, but in the subcontinent, right? Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they were converted not by Saudi Arabian petrol money. They were converted to Islam by Sufi saints, by the Chishtis and the Awliyas and Moinuddin and Nizamuddin and Shah Jalal, and people who were Sufi in their thinking about Islam and in their preaching. That's why we still have shrines to which millions, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, Parsis, everybody goes. Ajmer. It is what you mean by Islam then.
Yeah.
That's what it means. And that's why people say, oh, they've taken it out of, he's taken out of the Islam. He's not. He's one of the main perpetrators of disciples of Sufi Islam. Sorry, that was too long. But it gets me going. Next.
I
Have
think,
we gone?
Yeah, sorry, there was some freezing.
No, you're back now, yeah.
Yeah, I'm back. Any questions that you can pick up from the audience, Mohini? I don't think I missed anything. There were lots of comments rather than questions.
There are lots of comments.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, I have a question as well.
Please go ahead.
Time.
Yeah.
Any abusive comments?
There's lots of comments and
yeah, but nothing abusive.
No.
Why not?
But no, sorry, I missed that. No, not at all.
and we are not censoring.
Good.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead, Mohini.
No, I was just curious because you mentioned that you've worked through bridge translations to develop this translation of yours. So I was just wondering how you sort of worked with the original text without, like you were saying that you used a lot of old translations. You spoke to people who speak Persian. I was just wondering how that process worked for you.
See, I don't read Persian. I don't read Persian. My father lived in Persia in the last years of his life. So I used to go there, right, and spend my holidays. And of course, I know how to buy bread, or I know how to, pay some riyals out. I know how to say good morning. I know how to say good evening. And I know how to say, can you please tell me your name? But, Persian is not my language at all. I don't speak it. But I have friends, and it started with my uncle, with my mamu, who reads Persian, speaks it, has memorized a whole heap of Rumi. Yeah. And then my late friend, Firdaus Ali, who actually, when we started on this enterprise, he would write out in prose all the translations with, and then when we met, he would read the poem, then talk in English, his translations. I turned that into verse. And I've done that, I forgot to mention that, next year or later this year, I've translated with Firdaus a selection of Hafiz, another Persian poet. So HarperCollins is going to publish the Hafiz. Hafiz is different from Rumi. Insofar he's not that broad, not that wide, but he's more concentrated on earthly love. Again, with the ambivalence that earthly love and godly love is interchangeable.
Wonderful.
So you'll see that.
Looking forward to that.
I think if I can just add, there's one of the questions, I think is related to this. I mean, how do you find the energy to go on like this?
The energy.
The question is also around, this is a question by Arun, and he says that, poetry needs an environment of sort of aloofness to concentrate. So given the many hats that you wear, how do you find the energy or time to sort of, create poetry like this?
Well, there's no answer to that question. I suppose it's all, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever helps.
Each one has to find, one's own drug, right?
I know, you find the time, then you fill in the time. Tell you what, I don't watch too much television, or even though I have a television job just now. So
is that a message that you are sending us?
No, everybody else ought to watch television because I work for MX for a television web series and, editing their scripts and so on. But the less you watch, the less you imitate if you're a creator. You create from life.
This is the reason you've managed to write so many books in the last year.
Yes. You can work for television, you can write for television, but don't watch it.
Yeah, true. Right from life.
Right.
And the reason is in this COVID plague, what else to do? You write, I read, I watch bits of television, of course, and then I cook. I open up all sorts of cookbooks. Parsi cookbook. I've even tried Punjabi dishes, for God's sake. I can make a sarson ka saag.
Yeah.
Truth.
I'm sure you don't eat them.
What? I mean, eat them, of course I do. But the one thing I can tell you is I buy dosa mix, right? And it always gets cracked. It never comes out smooth like the shops. I don't know what to do. I have to ask for advice, and nobody gives me proper advice on.
Yeah.
It's like translations, Farrukh sir.
Dosas.
When they come,
perfect.
When they come, they come, and when they don't come, they can't come.
No, idli, rasam, sambar, they all work out perfectly. It's the wretched dosas that get cracked and stiff and not soft and sometimes too thick, and it doesn't matter.
I love how wide-ranging our discussion has been today.
Yeah, I think we began with Hyderabadi biryani, and we ended up with South Indian dosa. And I think the only thing that you did not add in your itinerary for next year is a visit to Hyderabad, so that we can give you both, the biryani as well as the dosa.
Definitely.
How lovely! I've been to Hyderabad. I'll tell you how. Right, the Hyderabad Dramatic Society bought a short story of mine called Bollocks. Right, and they said they'd put it on stage. Could they do it? I said, yeah. I forgot about it. Then I was in Bangalore with my sister, and Adrian, who lives in Hyderabad, old friend, called me and said, "You're in Bangalore. Come to Hyderabad. It's only 10 minutes by plane or whatever, right? Because they're showing they're doing on stage a stage play of yours." I said, "What?" And then I remember that, the Hyderabad Dramatic Society had bought this stage play. So I went one weekend, landed at Hyderabad. Adrian picked me up and he said, "I'll take you to where the drama is." And I went there, and there are these big posters saying, "Hyderabad Dramatic Society puts on Farrukh Dhondy's Bollocks." Right? That's how they presented it. So I turned up at the theatre in the afternoon, and they were rehearsing in the basement, and knocked at the door, came in, and they said, no, go away, we're rehearsing here. Until the director turned around, saw my face, and said, "What the hell? What are you doing here?" And I said, "I come to see your play." He said, "You want to watch the rehearsal?" I said, "No, I'll come in the evening and watch the real thing," which I did. So that was fun.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Farrukh sir, for this lovely conversation. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Full of life, full of work.
Privileged to be here, really.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohini, for beautifully holding this together. Thank you so much.
Okay. It was an honor for me, and a very happy birthday to you again. Have a lovely day. And I think this is a great finale to the wonderful festival that all of you have put together at Hyderabad Literary Festival. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Hyderabad Literary Festival.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.
Okay,
bye now.
Bye. Thank you, Farrukh sir. Thank you.
Bye, Vijay.
Yeah.
పూసి కాసిందే కోలు పున్నాము వెన్నెల కోలు పూసి కాసిందే కోలు
నీరు నిమ్మల కింద గన్నెర్ల కింద వంగి పూలే రంగ కొంగందుతూనే వంగి పూలే రంగ
with this, we come to the end of the Hyderabad Literary Festival 2021, which for the last 2.5 days you have been watching from the comforts of your home, from the comfort of your homes online. And we are here to formally say goodbye to you and thank you to many of our supporters. And to do this, may I request my colleagues, Ajay Gandhi, Amita Desai, and Kinnara Murthy, and the entire team, please come on, switch on your videos, and we will just say a formal thank you to all our supporters, audience, and everybody else.
Well, thank you all for being here. The very first digital festival of Hyderabad Literary Festival. We have spent close to 50 hours, a little more than 50 hours, with almost 40 hours of screen time and 45 events over these 2.5 days. We could actually conduct every single stream that we had during the physical festival, and we could do this here. The fullness of the program was to really achieve festival environment, and I'm glad that we could do this with the kind of program that we had, with charged conversations, talks, storytelling, stage talks, poetry, the Kavyadhara, Youngistan Nukkad with their theatre, Nanha Nukkad, reading my book, exhibitions, podcast, workshops, you name it, and it was all there. Podcast was a new addition to this particular festival, HLF2021. We are very happy that you all have been with us through these 50 hours and close to 40 hours of screening time. Vijay, I think it might be difficult for people to come on. So we will just continue.
Yeah.
And I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of all my colleagues here, Kinnara Murthy, Ajay Gandhi, Vijay Kumar, and the rest of the team that has been working behind scenes. You could sometimes hear them, to thank various people. First and foremost, our festival committee, who encouraged us to continue with this festival this year. We had almost given up. We were not so sure whether this was possible, what the situation in January was going to be. And we are glad that they did encourage us and that we did take it upon ourselves to host this festival, the 11th edition. So a very warm thank you to all at the festival committee, including our chairperson, Jayesh Ranjan. I am happy to say that the back-end team, CMU as they call themselves, were absolutely fabulous. This is the first time that they did something of this scope, and they pulled it off rather well. The CMU team consists of Anuj, Prathamesh, and Rohan. Thank you, all of you, for really working on this. The CMU stands for Creators Media United. They are one of the supporters of this particular festival. Thank you so much, Anuj, Prathamesh, and Rohan. I would like to thank my own office team, who stopped work about a month ago doing everything else and devoted themselves to this particular project, led by Jyoti Bezwada, Pal, Padma, Jyoti Sirivaram, Satish, Valli, Sheikh, Dhanashri, who was part of our last year's team and from Bombay came on board to participate, and stellar performance of all the team from Goethe Zentrum. Thank you so much. The sponsors of this edition, have really made it possible. We began late, and we were not so sure which direction we are going, but there were a handful of people who came together and supported the Indian Immunological Limited, Department of Language and Culture, Government of Telangana, Manbhoom, and my own office, Goethe-Zentrum, as a matter of tradition, participated also in supporting and sponsoring this event. We had other supporters, ALF, the publishing house, Blue Pencil for the design work. Thank you, Sadhana. I mentioned the Creator United, Goethe Institute, our head office in Calcutta, Delhi, HarperCollins, Juxtapose, Manthan, represented by Ajay Gandhi here, Moving Images, represented by Kinnara Murthy here, NRB, OBS, Oxford University Press, Red Balloon, Rolly Books, Rupa, Speaking Tiger, and Westland. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming in and supporting us to make this festival possible. Before I close, on behalf of all my colleagues here, I would like to invite feedback from you, the audience. Tell us how it was, tell us what you liked, tell us what could be different, and do write to us the feedback of individual sessions and or the full program, as you know, over the last couple of days. I would like to end here now. Thank everyone one more time. Thank Corona that we could technically